cut short my presentation because I had crucial for debate and carrying forward the debate into the larger society. Now, any policy document has to be judged. Last time I mentioned 3-4 points. But if you go through the Kasturirangan committee and later the policy proposal, now of course cabinet approved proposal has slightly changed the whole thing. But the purpose of education, in fact, what we were discussing last time is the Kothari Commission, which said that the education should respond to social needs and not wants. And so education is the conscience of a nation, it's a change agent, it's a transformation of the society. These are the objectives which Kothari Commission raised. In pursuit of those objectives, Kothari Commission suggested a common school through neighborhood school, so that all children study in the common school in the neighborhood, so that children among themselves can interact, and the school can act a place where the children start changing by interacting with all other communities and castes and all that, and the child grows into a broader child and interacts with other at human level, and not with these meta categories and bringing in his background. Even if he brings his background and community background, a school will have to gradually change and see that they enter into relations where they start treating everybody with dignity, self-respect, certain equality. At least a common school had that objective. But the present education policy, if you look at they are mentioning a just and equitable society. There is a change from the original document to this one. The cabinet approved proposal is talking about just and equitable society. Then they are also talking of changing global technological context. They are also talking of the interdisciplinary approach and broadening the base of knowledge. These are some of the things that they talk about. But if you look at the objectives, then the original document says revamping all aspects of education structure, including its regulation and governance, to create a new system of education aligned with aspirational goals of 21st century, including sustainable development goals, while building upon Indian traditions and value system. This is one, part which we have to read very carefully, very critically. Then they also added rich heritage of ancient and eternal Indian knowledge and Indian knowledge and thought has been guiding light of this policy. This policy is guided by the heritage of ancient and eternal Indian knowledge and thought, and that's the guiding light of this policy. The pursuit of knowledge, gnana, wisdom, pragya, and truth, satya, was always considered in Indian thought and philosophy as highest human goals. The aim of education in ancient India was not just acquisition of preparation for life in the world or life beyond school, but complete liberation of self. This is, the philosophy that is guiding this. This is the philosophy or the theoretical framework that is guiding this policy. Now, I think we have to now raise this question, that when they are talking about the traditional eternal values, what values? And what is this eternal, values that Indian society handed over to its succeeding generations? If you take a look at the present society, what is the heritage that we have inherited? And we are saying that we have inherited a very rich heritage and highest human goals like philosophy and thought. Is it that India has been pursuing highest human goals? Has the tradition and the traditional values have been eternal? Is it that we have inherited a very, humane and equitable, fair and just society? What are the values that they represent? That I think is one of the questions that under this framework, this document has been prepared. So therefore, we have to be extremely careful about the ideological framework. And this ideological framework which they are talking about is now we would raise the question that Indian heritage, if you look at the original document of Kasturlangan, they talk of Aryabhatta, then Chakra, all that, but they do not talk about the heritage of Ekalavya or, the what has happened, what injustice has been done in the past. Nor they talk about the subaltern thinkers. They do not even mention Phule, a Phule tradition or Savitri Bai tradition, but they talk about the high Brahminical intellectuals who have, they think that these are the people who have given us a rich heritage. But that rich heritage has been a heritage of hierarchical society, a rich heritage of a society with a discrimination institutionalized, a hierarchy which treats human beings as unequal, a hierarchy which has certain value system built in where human beings are not treated as human beings. Now this if you want to formulate a new policy, you have to critique the existing system. Then policy should emanate from a critique of the system, not saying that we have inherited rich heritage and all that. Because the heritage that we have inherited is not a heritage which is humanitarian, heritage which is democratic, which is a participative, which is harmonious, which is equitable, which is fair and just, whatever the rhetoric one uses. But one has to reflect on this question that the critique, they say now we have to, the policy has to talk about the 21st century aspirational goals, education aligned with the aspirational goals of 21st century. What are these aspirational goals of the 21st century? So technological world, superpower, the 5 trillion economy, these are the, this is the rhetoric, 21st century. 21st century aspirations of the middle class and the upper classes is okay to be a part of the global capital. That is the aspiration. But the 21st century aspirations are not humanizing this world. 21st century happens democratizing the world. It is not, providing the mobility to the people. It's not, equalizing the property structure. It's not, guaranteeing a dignified life to every human being. That's not the 21st century. 21st century aspiration is aspiration of certain sections of the society to be a part of the, wealth, to be part of the growth. So what are these 21st century aspirational goals is, I think, is one thing that we have to very seriously think about. So 21st century aspirations are talking in terms of the global capital, talking in terms of, the entry of the global capital and competitive world, and all these things go as a part of the neoliberalism, which I was also mentioning last time. So therefore, the entire framework of this new education policy is in that structure. And therefore, when they are saying revamping all aspects of education, it is dismantling the existing structure of education. But what you don't find in the policy document is that why do you want to dismantle the present education system? And what is wrong with the present education system? Where have we gone wrong with the education system? If Kothari talked about a common school to neighborhood school, we have not enforced it. And in 1985, we brought another policy document, and that brought Navodaya school, that brought the different types of schools, and they brought dualism into the education system. And therefore, and then we had a knowledge commission. And what was the purpose of knowledge? If Kothari said education should respond to social needs, this Sam Petroda, when we had a seminar in Hyderabad University on Higher Education Knowledge Commission, we had a online this one, and Sam Petroda participated from America. And I have asked him that what is the purpose of education according to him, and he said increasing the production, enhancing the consumption. This was his worldview. Now, in increasing the production and enhancing the consumption, is even animal participates in some sort of production, and it also eats. Human beings are not to eat and to produce. Human life is a multi-dimensional life. Human life is a very rich life. Human being is a creative human being. Human beings are not for production and production and consumption is a part of the life. But production and consumption does not define the meaning to life. But now, Sam Petroda policy document, he was started sending this, dispatches. For the first time again, we have a commission, a full-fledged commission, and they have prepared a very long document, Kasturirangan Committee. And obviously, Kasturirangan Committee was also vetted by the Nagpur. And therefore, the ideological framework today, as far as the Bharatiya Janata Party and the present regime is concerned, they attach a lot of importance to education. They know that what education means, because upper caste and upper classes were the immense beneficiaries of education or knowledge, whatever we may call. They were the, they controlled, they hegemonized the world through their knowledge system, through their Sanskrit, through their entire hegemonic ideology. So they know that education, whatever during last 70 years we have had, whatever might be its handicaps and whatever might be failures, but the universities, at least in 1960s, opened up to rural boys, and at least a small section of the Dalits and the, the Adivasis entered the education system. Even 1960s, they were absent when I was a student. But by late 60s, after the identity movements, we find that the Dalits started entering in a little bigger way into the system. And the collapse of the education system started, or dismantling of education system started as the entry of the rural boys and girls from the agrarian structure. Quality education for the new generation of first generation students and all that. And Usman University that we studied and Usman University that you see now, there you can see the difference. You can see the difference even between Central University and Usman University, because Usman City has large number of rural boys and girls, large number. Maybe 70–80% of them today come from the deprived background, and that university just collapsed. When I was in the university, we were getting the 150 journals. Today they get 2 journals in social sciences, and the laboratories are starved. The building is not maintained. Why have dismantled education? Because as the social mobility started, and as the newer democratic voices started coming up and questioning the whole system, questioning the caste system, questioning the hegemony, alternative, thinking started. Importance of education. Himself started education, one of the transformers of the society. As the Brahminical class realized in the ancient India, Dr. Ambedkar realized that today the society is hegemonized because of the education. And once we have an access to education, that's why he said educate, organize, and agitate. Now, therefore, you find that. Now, on the top of it, by the 1990s, what I mentioned in my last lecture, the global capital entered. And we have a capitalist path of development. Now, with the result, now we are a part of the global economic process, and the market is completely open. And once you open the market, the capital entered, and you have serious problems of development. On the one hand, we talk of Atmanirbharta, we talk of self-sufficiency, we talk of nation's pride, we talk of nationalism. And on the other hand, we allow foreign investment in the different sectors, including education. Now they want to open the education to the foreign capital. Now, and this policy document, this policy definitely says that 200 top American universities will come to, or the global universities, they will come to India. We are asking a question that if you are opening the private universities, and even Telangana now has the private universities, they don't talk of social justice. They don't talk of scholarships. Although this document says 50% will be given, say the affordable, accessible education. But the Economic Times has written editorial the last time I was mentioning. Economic Times says no profit, educational institutions, how is it possible? And Economic Times is a very important, newspaper. They are saying that how is it possible? They are entering for profit, and you are talking of the no profit. And if 50% of the weaker sections are to be, are to be accommodated or are to be admitted into these universities, now if 50% have to, who will support? Where from they will raise the resources? And why would anybody come? And these are that the foreign and the private universities will have to observe certain norms. There is a lot of critique coming from the different sections, from the particular from the capital. So once you are pro capital and your education system is rooted in the capitalist path of development, capital is not compassionate. Of course, this document uses compassion, kindness, concern. Some of these terms are they are used in the present document also. Compassion is not necessarily a very positive value. What is compassion? No, people have a right. People have a right to have access to education because the producers of the wealth who are there in the rural economy or in the labor class in the industry, they are producing the wealth of this country. Their children have every right to have access to quality education and have every right to be mobile in the system. It has to facilitate social mobility. That's one way that bringing the question of equity and justice. But the entire policy document does not talk about social justice. It does not talk about social. It mentions, but how the private universities will ensure social justice and how the private universities and the corporate, the foreign universities will admit, and the private universities are openly telling. If you look at the private university bill in a Telangana, they never talk of the reservations. They never talk about the social justice because they say that they are not the social justice, and they are not there to provide scholarship in the private system. But in the education, in the university, which provides the mobility and empowers the children from the deprived section to compete or to survive and to sustain in this system, education has to, sustain them. And you bring the private universities and they say that they invest thousands of crores and they have a quality that this and all that. Now with the result, what happens, what I was mentioning last time, that given the nature of the economy, the political economy, you find that 20% of the people are controlling 73% of the wealth of this country, or 73% of income. And the 80% of the people have and 20% is equivalent to American population of India. So you have a huge American population of American size with the purchasing power. University professor getting 2 lakh salary and all that, all of them are joining this market. And I know that the University of Hyderabad used to run a school. And when I was there in in fact, most of the professor children used to go to University of Hyderabad school. Most of the professors have sent their children to Hyderabad, including our employees. Our class 4 employee, their children also used to go there. But once the system started changing, and when the professor's salary has gone up, thanks to the pay commission, and our salaries got multiplied, our salary tripled and tripled, and we were getting the 20,000, 30,000. When I joined the teaching profession, I was getting 430 rupees. So today the lifestyle of the professor has changed. And with the result, professors, all of them started sending their children to the corporate schools. And Hyderabad University School collapsed. So obviously, when you bring in the name of the competition, and when you bring these people who can afford, and now you find that in India, another layer is emerging where the parents are sending children to America and to London after the +2. This was not the case about 20 years back. I don't think that the +2 children are going to Cambridge University, Oxford University, Columbia University. No, but I know in my own friend circle, number of parents have sent their children abroad after +2. So therefore, you find that this entire duality that is going to be created with these private universities and all that. And I therefore request my friends to read the private university bills and private university acts. What is the policy statement they make, and how are they going to really admit and support the students coming from the deprived section and that section of the society. I think this is one of the important things that we have to consider. Now I come to another part of the document, which is 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. It's a dismantling 10 plus 2 plus 3. All right. I mean, now supposing they say that preschool education also they brought kindergarten and Anganwadis into the system. That Anganwadi 2 years is added to the primary education, so they made it 5 years, and then they made it 3 for the middle school, and another 3, and then they brought in the 4. Okay, this is the structure, but for a very strange reasons, they say after the 6th class, that is 5 plus 3, after the 8, they will go for vocational education. And those who pursue plus 3 and plus 4, that stream will be different. And vocationalized education after the 7th class or the 6th class, you imagine what they are saying is that we require skills, right? And the skills are needed for the market, understandable. But what exactly they are planning is to produce artisan classes, carpenters and potters, and I mean, they want to they mention that crafts and all that. Who are the children who will go to these courses? Is the upper class and upper class students will drop out at 6th class and go for a vocational school? Vocational naturally, children coming from the deprived background, they would say that if we acquire some skills, we can go and join some job. So the vocation, which used to start after the plus 2 engineering, politics, whatever, now you want to bring in at the age of, when the child is in the 6th class, and from the 6th, vocationalizing is different. Vocation is different from knowledge. Knowledge creates an empowered human being. Knowledge creates an enlightened human being. First, you create a human being, a knowledgeable human being, then give skill. So I have a knowledge. I know how to question. I have the knowledge to interact, to reflect on this, what is happening in the world. I know the causes, what is happening. Then I acquire a skill for my livelihood. But knowledge is for life and skill is for livelihood. Now you are reducing the knowledge into skill formation. And therefore you give the skills at the 6th class child and ask him to get out. And then, by the 10th class, the children will be left out, and only the children with the, better off background will be left, and they will come from plus 4. They will go for plus 2, or they will go for, high professional courses and all that. So this division which has been there in Indian tradition between the knowledge and the skill, between the labor and the mental labor and manual labor, that manual labor and mental labor, the rating, while manual labor produces the real wealth of the country, now the intellectuals, all that, to produce ideas. But what human beings require is the material wealth, that's true. But then the material, those who are engaged in that wealth are completely downgraded. They are looked down. And those who are supposed to be having ideas, generating ideas and all that are supposed to be rated very high. And the knowledge is elevated to that status. Why don't you give the same knowledge to everybody and then have a skill? But in fact, this design of the present policy to see that the children, go for vocational education at a very early childhood, I think is something which we have to very seriously question. That vocationalization after plus 2 is all right, but vocationalization after plus 3, that is 5 plus 3, I think is something which is negation of the entire policy goals. If you are talking of fairness, justice, mobility, all that, this is what happened. Now you come to graduation, plus 4. Plus 4, all of us who joined graduation, complete the graduation. But now what they are saying is in the plus 4, after 2 years they can drop out. They will give a diploma. After 3 years they can drop out. They will give some degree. And after 4 years they will become graduates to go to for further education. I am asking this question: who will, after joining graduation, who are the children who will drop out after plus 2? If graduation is graduation, all children should study the graduation. And they should study for 4 years. I mean, it's understandable. And then they may choose their occupations in life. But why do you want the children to drop out at different stages? Now, if you higher education, they say 50% of the people will be, by 2030, 50% of the people will go to higher education and all that. If you say that 50% of children will go to higher education in 1930, by 1940, you will be universalized education and all that. So next 20 years you are projecting. But then why are you introducing +2? I mean, dropout at 2, at 3, at 4, number one. Secondly, when you brought the 4-year degree course, I was mentioning last time also, when you brought the 4-year degree course, there is no justification that why graduation has to be 4 years than not 3 years. At least no parents can, after 3 years, the child will be equipped. For my employment market is being bleak, that's a different thing. That's a different question altogether. But at least after +3, you are a graduate with a confidence. But then if you are making it 4 years, the education become more costly. If somebody is studying in Delhi or in a metropolitan city, University of Hyderabad experience itself. 3 years I know when we study, the integrated master course, we have to study for 5 years. 5 years, but somebody has to sustain where parental income is very low. So therefore, you are making 4 years without any justification, and 4 years are introduced not because we thought that knowledge is exploding. 3 years is not enough for a graduate to absorb knowledge, and therefore they must study for 4 years. I mean, there was no debate as such. What is wrong with the present graduates, whether they are inadequately equipped and all that. 4 years degree course is introduced, my friends. Please understand that America has a 4 years graduation course. And since American universities are coming to India, they are asking the question that if your graduation is for 3 years, how do we admit your graduates in our universities, where in America we admit the students after 4 years graduation. Now, therefore, to prepare our universities to send our children to American or foreign universities, you are changing your education policy and this 4 years thing. For more to cater to the global capital and global institutions than to the Indian students and Indian requirements. So this is the one thing that that has happened. Now, another thing in this document is you are completely centralizing. Last time I mentioned this point. This National Commission for Education, right, higher education, and entire NCERT, the entire curriculum of the nation, I'm talking, the entire curriculum will be prepared in Delhi. And you know who will prepare the policy, who will prepare the curriculum, the lessons, and what they are going to introduce, what will be the syllabus. Now, what about the state governments? Education is in the concurrent list. And education should be left to the state governments, although the cabinet approved proposal talks about the role of the state governments. But they are talking about the role of the state government more in implementation of the policy than formulation of the policy. And we know that, at least when I was the chairman of the curriculum committee for the Telangana Public Service Commission, we brought a lot of Telangana component. We brought Bhagireddy Verma, we brought our own, heroes and all that into the system. We brought our own movements and struggles. I mean, as far as possible, we tried. Maybe still it requires some more. That's a different thing. But we put ourselves in the context, and then we prepared the syllabus so that our children, are fully aware of the environment, in which they are living. But if you centralize the curriculum preparation, if you centralize the complete preparation of lessons and all that, who will prepare those lessons? And what will be the content of the lessons is again another important thing, that the entire ideological, the traditional, because they talk of the rich heritage and rich traditions. If you bring the entire tradition, rich heritage, that you have to proud, but we are not. We have another culture and another tradition where we are not proud of it, but we are very critical of it. And therefore your curriculum has to be completely different. Each university, we know that University of Hyderabad, and I still remember that when I was in the Kakatiya University, when the first generation students joined, and the first generation, when I was teaching, they started questioning the whole curriculum. They said that, what is this you are teaching? This theory and this philosophy, who requires this? There are concrete problems in the villages. Why don't you explain? about the poverty, about the structure, about the agriculture, about the labor. Every day I had a problem in the class because the first generation students were challenging the existing education system. With the result, we had to change our syllabus. We had to change complete curriculum to cater to our students and to their demands. And now you will not have this freedom. Suppose if University of Hyderabad students say that we want curriculum of a different kind. We want the curriculum to teach about these questions, these challenges. We want social movements, a course on the social movements. We want a paper politics or Dalit politics. We want the Dalit identity, Dalit assertion. Supposing we ask, universities will not have the freedom. Although the Kasturanga said universities will be completely free. They will be fully autonomous. They will appoint their own vice chancellor. This is what all that they have said. But then the entire and the different standards, the test for all Indian students. So even for graduation admission, they will manage at Delhi level, they will give the ranking and the students will join like our all India entrance examination like that. Now they are saying that there will be one common exam and they say that one India, one exam, one test and all that. But if you are talking in terms of the exam, centralized examination, you must remember that the medical entrance exam when was centralized, one of the girls in Tamil Nadu, who was one of the topper, the Dalit girl, she committed suicide because she didn't get into. And her argument, and even her brother was arguing when I went to Chennai to address a meeting. One of the sitting judges also came, and then we were talking that the girl left a suicide note. Now, if the exam was a Tamil center, I mean, it was for confined to Tamil Nadu, she would have got. Because competition is within Tamil Nadu. And all of the Tamil Nadu, whatever standards are there, they are there. But if the students have to compete for a centralized examination system, now and if you are going to give ranking to the students, who do you think will benefit? So I think the national examination is going to be centralized, curriculum is going to be centralized, governance is going to be centralized, all institutions like University Grants Commission, all inside technical education, all these institutions which were decentralized, all of them merged into the National Human Education Commission. So it is going for completely centralization of education. So I think this is one of the catch up in this document, and we have to see this document from that angle. Then very interestingly, after the 6th class they are talking of the vocationalization, but after the post-graduation they are talking of multidisciplinary, and human knowledge is vast. You should not be center specialized only one area. Your knowledge should be so vast that you should be prepared for 3-4 jobs. You are talking about that. And then when you are talking of the 6th class child should become vocational education, but those who go to the higher education, they should be broad based, and their knowledge should be broad based, their skills should be broad based. Now, is it not you are creating again a sort of a caste system that you create again one set of elite section which is highly educated, highly qualified, ready for engineering? For example, IIIT introduced already a course, a dual course. And in the IIIT, which is our neighboring institution, because I am also going and interacting with the students, what they have done, BTech engineering and BTech in social science and humanities, the dual degree. So the student can go for the engineering for any IT company, and student can go for research in social sciences. So the education at that level is changing. It's a broadening. But education at the school level is narrowing down. You see the whole contradiction, how the education policy is formulated. Somehow, I think this policy document reproduces existing social structure rather than transforming existing social structure. There is a caste, this one professional, vocational, and the broader and knowledge systems and all that, you are creating to create a completely different structure altogether. So I think this is where we have to critique the system and go through the whole thing and see that what is the catch up, what is the between the lines we should be able to read the document. Because document looks, if you read the document, with a lot of rhetoric is there, fairness, justice, and all those are there. But when actually you look at the document, you look at the system is going to, in other words, the upper caste and upper classes are going to capture again the world of education. And the children who are coming from the rural background, or coming from the poorer background, or from the industrial labor background, those children will be again left with the discrimination and the inequality and injustice. I think we have to be able to see this intention of this policy document. That's the only way we can carry the debate forward. Otherwise, if you go by the rhetoric of the document, if you don't read the between the lines of the document, and what exactly, where are they heading the education system, if you don't ask that question, then I think we will be left in a lurch. And everybody may welcome, and foreign universities are coming, India is joining the modern world, this and all that. Okay, one section will join that section. I come from a lower middle class background. I know that how difficult, but education was so affordable that I could come. But otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to come to Hyderabad at all. My father used to spend, send 40 rupees per month. I used to cook my own food and study. But at least education was not charging fee. It was free. It was free. If they were charging the fee like the present system, I wouldn't have studied. I would have we should facilitate mobility. And education should make human being enlightened. Education should make human being to question. Education should make a human being to critically think that what is wrong with the existing system. And knowledge, new knowledge is needed. Alternative knowledge is needed. So I think this entire structure is asymmetrical, narrow, and the bottom, vocational education, skill-based education, production. Now we are arguing say way that you first universalize education up to +2, universalize. Now by bringing the lower KG into the school education, what they have done is they are talking of the universalization of literacy, mathematics and all that. Now, you look at this thing, the Anganwadi ayas will be teachers. And now they're saying by giving them, but when you are bringing the children into the school, now to the school, and
Raja, is the connection there? I think we lost Sir's connection. You're on mute. You're on
Yes,
mute.
yes, no, yeah.
Sir is back.
Is he? Yeah. There seems to be some signal problems with Professor Hargopal.
Raja, you're on mute. I cannot hear you.
I unmuted Charan. You
Yes,
able to hear me now?
yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. There were some signal problems, it seems, from Professor Hargopal's side. So that is.
Yeah, I'm just trying to connect to with Sir. Just give me a second.
Yeah, yes, you may continue. Yeah. It seems that there is a technical problem with on the end of Professor Hargopal.
సార్ ఫోన్ కాల్ చేయండి కుమార్ రాజా
Sir.
హరగోపాల్
Please.
సార్ ఇంటికి ఫోన్ చేయండి.
Yes, yes, మన చరణ్.
ఓకే
Yes,
ఓకే
Charan is on that.
ఓకే థ్యాంక్ యూ.
I request all the participants to meanwhile, you can pose some questions if there are any. Till now.
I just a minute, Raja. I just spoke to sir. Sir is going to join us in a minute.
Yeah.
You can carry on with, if there's any questions, you can write down in the chat box.
Yes, we are having a question and answer session as well at the end of the session. So if there are any questions, please, some of us already has commented their questions here. So I think sir will respond at the end of the session. If you have any questions till now with the session, Professor Hargopal has spoke, you can use this time because he will be joining us shortly.